Well, good morning. Ooh, feel hot up there. Am I hot out there? All right. Sounds loud to me. This morning, if you haven't been with us for the past month, we are in a series on the book of Psalms. And the first week, Randy started off right where everybody starts when they start a study on the book of Psalms, and that was in Psalm 51. Yes, really? No, he didn't really do that. Then we went to Psalm 1 with John, and then last week, Sam McVeigh preached in Psalm chapter 2, and he hit the gospel really hard last week, which was cool. Now, the book of Psalms is a book of wisdom. All the Psalms, depending on your style of worship, they can be sung as songs. There's actually a group out there who has made that their life's mission. If you want to go into Spotify and type the Psalms as songs, you can go listen to all the ones they've done so far. They're not done yet, but it's pretty cool. And because of that, some of the Psalms have different structures. They have different methods that they utilize to communicate their point. And we're going to be in Psalm chapter 25 today, as Miss Jan read from. And Psalm chapter 25, it's a little bit of a mess structurally. And I think I know why, but my opinion doesn't make that fact. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's almost an acrostic poem. If you don't know what an acrostic is, you take every letter in the alphabet of your language, and you start each stanza or each line with the consecutive character. So you start A and you go to Z, and you go A, B, C, D, all the way down. So if this was in English, there would be 26 lines or 26 stanzas, but it's in Hebrew, so there's 22. But it's not perfect. There are some characters that are jumped over. There are some characters that are missed. And I read, I don't know how many commentaries and listened to how many sermons in the past few weeks on this. Nobody can agree why it's like that. Genuinely, there's just not a consensus as to why it's like that. It's also almost a chiasm. Does anybody know what that is? Chiasm? I had one yes nod over here. All right. I actually read that word and I knew it, and I just thought, I don't know how to pronounce that word, but I hadn't seen it since high school literature, high school English class. And it's a structure of a poem where the first verse and the last verse mirror each other. And then the second verse and the second to last verse mirror each other. And the third verse and the third to last verse, and so on until they meet in the middle. What Jan read, verse number 11, at the end of what she read, that's technically the middle of this, but it's not a perfect chiasm either. There's some parts of it that don't actually mirror each other. So it's kind of just this mess structurally. And it's a mess structurally, and we don't exactly know when in David's life it was written either. And so some Psalms, there are very specific things that are happening in David's life, and he mentions them. And that can be helpful so we know exactly what he's dealing with as he's writing these words. As a couple examples, Psalm chapter 3. David is fleeing Absalom. Absalom's trying to kill him, which I can't even imagine, your own family trying to kill you. But it tells us that in Psalm chapter 3. So when we read it, we have that understanding, that context. Psalm 18, it talks about how he was delivered from the hand of Saul. So this would have been after David was appointed king, after he escaped the wrath of Saul. And then Psalm 51 was obviously in direct response to the fact that Nathan told him that he was going to have consequences for his sin of having an affair and then killing the woman's husband. So this psalm is just a psalm of David. That's all it says. There's not specifics in the context of the passage itself to tell us this exact timing of his life, but there is tone, there is context in itself that we can infer that this was a time in David's life that was later on. It was when he was a little bit older. It was when I would say that he was a seasoned man, right? He had experienced a lot. He had been brought into the court of the king, and then he had been kicked out of the court of the king, and then he had brought into the favor of the king again, but he couldn't enter the court of the king, and then the king tried to kill him, and then he killed other people, and then his family members tried to kill him. He's had the life that's just insanity. And those are just very brief highlights. There's a lot more that you can find in the scripture about the ups and downs of David's life. This psalm doesn't really have the venom of some of the Psalms from his younger years. It doesn't have the intensity of it. I want to give an example of this. So Psalm chapter 3, that's when his kin's trying to kill him, right? He's fleeing. There's men trying to kill him. Psalm chapter 3, verse 7. It's not going to be up there. Just listen to it with me if you would. It says, "Save me, O my God, for you strike all my enemies on the cheek. You break the teeth of the wicked." So this is Psalm. He's being pursued by men, and he's asking God to give his enemies a literal right hook and break their jaw. Seriously, that's what he's doing. There is so much venom in that. There is so much intensity in that. There's a desperation in that, right? He thinks he's going to die. He's desperate, calling out to the Lord. But listen to Psalm chapter 25, which we were in verse 2, about how he asks for protection from his enemies. "Oh my God, in you I trust. Let me not be put to shame. Let not my enemies exalt over me." It's a much softer tone. It's not nearly as intense. And it starts out with trust in the Lord and not the desperate cry of "Save me, God." It's "I trust in you, God." So this specific psalm, I believe, and it is the prevailing wisdom, that this is later on in David's life. This is after he's experienced a lot. I also believe that's why it's a little bit of a mess, because I don't think he cares as much about the structure as the content, about what he's saying. But again, that's an Austin opinion. Don't like quote that on Facebook and say that's why it's this way. So, the big idea today, I don't know if the big idea is in your bulletins, but the big idea today is that life makes you humble. And this whole psalm is a psalm of humility. We're going to talk about it. I'd like to tell a story about when I got my first full-time ministry position. It was here in Wichita. It was at West Douglas Church of Christ. Anybody know? A really small congregation, like 30 people. I didn't think anybody had crossed paths with them. But they're over on West Douglas, and I was there for about 3.5 years, and I was the only full-time staff member as a youth minister, which is a little weird. But I was there for about 3.5 years, and about 3 years in, I remember kind of walking through some prayers and desires in my life and thinking, I really love this ministry that I'm doing, but it's kind of easy. Not that ministry on the whole is easy. Dealing with people is always going to bring baggage and trouble and potentially trauma, right? But that specific job and the things that I actually got paid to do was pretty simple. It's a small congregation. They didn't have a lot of overhead. It wasn't very difficult to do the job. And so I thought, I really want to be challenged in ministry. I want to be challenged. I want something where I'm going to be using my full week to do the work, where I'm actually putting in more work, because I wasn't needing to put in 40 hours to complete the work. And so I thought about that for a while, prayed about that for a while, took it to my elders. My elders said, hey, you're right. Like, we're just a small congregation. We're not going to probably explode, and we're also probably not going to die. We have a low overhead. We're a family congregation. We have generations that just keep coming to the church. So if that's really what you want, you probably won't find that here. And they actually gave their blessing, which was really cool, gave them several months' notice, ended up leaving that job. And the prayer that I had at the time was, Lord, challenge me in ministry. I want to be challenged. And then as life went on and we experienced things, I found out pretty quickly I probably didn't need to pray that. It just kind of happens anyway, right? Just not a prayer that I needed. We live in a broken and a fallen world. People are sinful and prideful. Even folks who are trying to do it right, trying to please the Lord, trying to honor God in their lives are still going to hurt you. There's still going to be things that happen that you have no control of. Probably not a prayer that I needed to pray. I have not prayed that prayer in any way since then. Genuinely, I have not. But that's life makes you humble. This psalm is a psalm of humility. This is David looking back on his life and saying, this is just kind of a baseline prayer for how I understand the world to work, who I am, who God is, and what my goals are in life, what I'm trying to accomplish as a servant of God. So, point number 1 in your bulletin is going to be that David has a proper understanding of who he is. And you might be able to just work through the next 3 if you're really astute on what we're going to be talking about here. David has a proper understanding of who he is. Now, David is a sinner, just like all of us, right? He's messed up. He knows this. He confesses it to the Lord. We're going to talk about a verse in a minute. But we're going to stay on this point for an extended period of time. I think that what David has discovered throughout his life, how he approaches God in this psalm, is probably one of the hardest things for us in our culture today. And we're actually going to we'll read verse 11 before I go into the specific point. All right, verse 11, chapter 25. For your name's sake, O Lord, pardon my guilt, for it is great. Shout out to whoever corrected my typo. Who was that? Hey, shout out for correcting my typo. I had a typo in that, but it's not there anymore. But pardon my guilt, for it is great. David comes before the Lord and he just says, I am guilty, I am a sinner, please forgive that. The reason that I think that's one of the hardest things for us to do in the society and culture that we currently live in is because we are smack dab in like the Mount Everest peak of whatever you feel, whatever you think, whatever you want, that is good and right and true, and do it. We are in the middle of that. That is so much of what we see in the messaging in media, just when we are interacting with others, the things that we are being taught genuinely in our places of education, of just whatever you think, whatever you want, whatever you feel is good and right and true. Scripture's directly opposed to that, right? Is deny yourself, take up your cross, love others, serve others before yourself, think of others as better than yourself or more important than yourself. Scripture's in direct opposition to that, but David has a really good understanding. He stands before the Lord naked and bare, and he says, forgive me. Now, we see this from David in other parts of the Scriptures as well, but sometimes he's actually confessing his guilt and asking forgiveness as a way to try to ask God to not give him the consequence of his sin. Of he's saying, oh yes, Lord, I have sinned, I am totally wrong. Please don't let me face this consequence of my sin that I have imparted on you or on others. This is not that. This is, again, a seasoned man coming to the Lord and saying, just forgive me. I know that I am guilty. Forgive me. There's a simple humility in that. So then after he asks God to forgive him for his sin, forgive him of his guilt, his transgressions, verses 12 through 15 are a prayer to God about who he wants to be, the man he wants to be. So if we want to throw those up on the screen, verses 12 through 15. Oh man, that's tiny. It's tiny back there. Is it tiny up here? Oh, you can read that. All right. Who is the man who fears the Lord? Him will he instruct in the way that he should choose. His soul shall abide in well-being, and his offspring shall inherit the land. The friendship, or the counsel, depending on your translation, of the Lord is for those who fear him, and he makes known to them his covenant. My eyes are ever toward the Lord, for he will pluck my feet out of the net. He knows he is a sinner, but he knows and understands that the only way that he is going to be able to pursue God is to ask for God's instruction in that. God holds all the answers. He holds all the keys. I don't want to go too much into that right now. But he has a humility before God. He's guilty. He wants the Lord to instruct him. This is similar to Paul in Romans chapter 7. In Romans in a lot of Romans, Paul talks about the duality of man, right? There's this want to serve the Lord, but we have this flesh that's upon us that's always going to want to sin. And in chapter 7, verses 21 through 25, did I give a slide on this one, Nicole? I don't have this. Okay, you'll just have to listen to me. Sorry. But in chapter 7 of the book of Romans, Paul is talking about this duality man. He wants to serve God. He knows that he is guilty, but he wants to serve God, and he's like fighting between these two things. And so, chapter 7, verses 21 through 25, so I find it to be a law that when I want to do right, evil lies close at hand. For when I delight in the law of God in my inner being, but I see in my members another law waging war against the law of my mind and making me captive to the law of sin that dwells in my members. Wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then I myself serve the law of God with my mind, but with my flesh I serve the law of sin. This is where David is. He knows that this is the truth. He wants to serve God, but he's going to fail. He's going to make mistakes. This is everybody. You want to serve the Lord and you are passionate about serving the Lord, that's great. That's awesome. The Lord honors your heart in that, but you will fail. You will not be able to succeed fully. You're going to have failures. All right, verses 6 and 7. Again, most of this, what we're talking about today, is point 1. We're going to be living here for a minute. Verses 6 and 7 of chapter 25. Remember your mercy, O Lord, and your steadfast love, for they have been from old. Remember not the sins of my youth or my transgressions. According to your steadfast love, remember me for the sake of your goodness, O Lord. Remember not the sins of my youth, I think, is probably one of the most relatable quotes of Scripture for anyone. Just anyone at all. As you get older, you realize when you are younger, you have made mistakes. You have done things that are not good. You have done things that are embarrassing, shameful, hurt others, hurt yourself, hurt your family. And I actually think one of the crazy things about that is that's true at every single age. I remember being a freshman in high school, going to my freshman orientation and learning about, we're actually talking about some of this morning, learning about high school and how it worked, right? I just got out of 8th grade, going to a new school, and thinking, my goodness, I'm 14 years old, right? Thinking, wow, 6th grade me, what an idiot, right? Well, I was so stupid. And I thought all these things, and I thought this was cool, and I thought this was cool, and now I'm in high school, and I really know what's going on, right? When I got to college, I remember looking back and going, what a moron I was in high school. How stupid was I? The things that I did, the things I said, how foolish I was. When I got out of college and I got my first full-time job, what an idiot, right? It happens your whole life. It happens your whole life. No matter how old you are, that is relatable. Remember not the sins of my youth. We make mistakes constantly all the time. When we look back, that's good that we have that perspective and that we have matured and learned. That's really good, but it's going to happen no matter how old you are. And the idea of being foolish in youth, this is actually something that the entire Scripture talks about in different ways. The Lord has ordered the universe in a way where when you are born, you don't know anything. And you grow and you mature and your brain doesn't fully develop until you're 25 years old. So if you're not 25 yet, you're not fully developed yet. And that's how God has ordered the universe to work. So it makes sense that when you look back, you think that you did things that were foolish. You think that you did things that were unwise, ungodly, immature. In Hebrews chapter 5 and in 1 Corinthians, in Hebrews and then Paul in 1 Corinthians, it is mentioned about this spiritual milk, right? When you are a young believer, you have this spiritual milk, and then you move on to solid food after a time. That's a picture of growing. It's a picture of maturing. It's just the way that the world works. So if you're thinking about your own life right now and you're looking back and thinking, oh yeah, what a moron I was, how stupid I was, how foolish was I? That's okay. It's all right. Some things you need to ask forgiveness for in that, and some things you just need to be better at. Now, this does not mean, I want to make sure I talk to my kiddos who are in the room. My kiddos, if you don't know, I don't have any biological children. When I say my kiddos, I mean youth kids or anybody who is under the age of 18. I feel like they're my kids. But this does not mean that you cannot love the Lord, you cannot serve the Lord, you cannot teach, you cannot preach because you are in this process of growing. You will always be in this process of growing. Would I dare ask, Mary, Max, are you still in this process of growing and maturing? They're giving me yes head nods. So I didn't ask you guys for any particular reason. But you're always going to mature and grow. So I always like to point out 1 Timothy chapter 2. Timothy is considered a young man in Jewish culture. A young man means you are less than 40 in that culture. So I'm still a young man according to that. But Paul encourages him and says, do not let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in faith, speech, life, love, and in purity. So again, being aware and knowing, having the knowledge that you were foolish when you were younger does not mean you can't teach, doesn't mean you can't have a passion for the Lord, you can't serve the Lord, just means you need to grow. That's what it means. All right, we're going to look at verses 19 through 21 now. And you might be noticing, I'm sure that you have, somebody is probably losing their mind. I am going insanely out of order numerically. There's a purpose behind that. Don't worry. So verses 19 through 21. Now, in verses 19 through 21, before I read it, he is talking about his enemies, but he's talking about them in a different way than as in the example I gave earlier, Psalm 3:7. So, 19 to 21. Consider how many are my foes, and with what violent hatred they hate me. Guard my soul and deliver me. Let me not be put to shame, for I take refuge in you. May integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait for you. Now, again, Psalm 3:7, he is literally asking God to punch his enemies in the face. It's just a crazy cool thing, imagery-wise, to ask God to do. I'd never have asked God to do anything like that. But in this, he's actually asking God to keep him from sinning against God because of what is happening to him. So it says, guard my soul. If you have an NIV or maybe a different translation, it might say save my body or guard my body. That's a bad translation. This is talking about the immaterial soul. It is not talking about his material body, his physical flesh. He is saying, God, look at everyone who is against me. Look at all my enemies and how violently they hate me. They want to do harm to me. Help me not sin against you, God, because of what they are doing to me. And then the following part of that, let me not be put to shame, for I take refuge in you. Don't let me be put to shame, God, because I know that would shame you, and I don't want that. His tone, again, is just of a man who has seen a lot and been through a lot, and he understands this is just kind of the baseline. I've got people who are against me, but I don't want to sin against God. I care about God. I care about my relationship with him. I care about keeping his name upright and true and good, not my own. Seems that when you read those Psalms, I actually went through, where's Graham? I don't know. I know he's here somewhere. Went through the Psalms with Graham. Hey, there he is over there in the back. That's Graham, everybody. Just wanted to embarrass him. We had set out a couple years ago, we were going to go through the Psalms, and we only made it to like 36 or something. We didn't end up getting all the way through. But it is amazing how many Psalms that David asks for physical violence against his enemies. And so again, it's just, he's come to a point in his life where he realizes, hey, that's not the most important thing, that I am the one who is physically saved. The most important thing is that God is honored. The most important thing is that God's name is made great. That's what is important. So David has a proper understanding of who he is. He is a sinner. He needs God. He asks God for help. He asks God for instruction, for teaching. He also has a proper understanding of who God is in this. And that is point number 2 that is in your notes. He has a proper understanding of who God is. This humility that David has, it puts him in a position to properly call upon God. When we read the scriptures and we talk about what it is to call upon the Lord for salvation, there is a heart element in that every time it's talked about, right? If we confess with our mouths that Jesus is Lord and believe in our heart that God raised him from the dead, he is faithful and just to forgive us, right? There's a heart element in that. Part of that heart element is you have to understand that you are hopeless and helpless without God. You are hopeless and helpless to save yourself. You will not be able to do that. You will not be able to live a full life without God. All good things come in and through God. And that is what David understands. David has a proper understanding of who God is. Let's go verses 4 and 5 of chapter 25 that we are in. Make me to know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I will wait all the day long. Make me know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. God created the universe. He understands better than anyone how it works. Part of the culture today, again, is just everything that you want, that you feel, that you desire, that you like. That's good and right and true, and you should do it. That mentality comes from the idea that you know what's best. and you don't. God created the world. He ordered it in a specific way. He knows what's best. We broke it. We ate of the tree. We sinned against God. We separated ourselves from God. So now we live in a world where we are dealing with the consequences of that. So then when we read the scriptures and we see God says, hey, I ordered it to be this way, or ordered it to be that way. He's not restricting us. He's telling us the truth of how it's supposed to work. Let's go to Job 38. Did I include this one on there? Okay. I was a little bit messed this week. I had lack of sleep, and so some of them are on there and some of them aren't. But I got them all marked in my Bible, so we're good. So Job 38, we're going to read verses 4 through 7. We're reading 4 through 7 specifically because that's where the paragraph break is. But we'll talk about it here in a second. But Job's frustrated. Job's upset about all the stuff he's going through. If you don't know the story of Job, he goes through a lot. And he actually keeps his faith for a really long time. But there is a point where he gets really frustrated with God. And this is the response from God. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding, who determined its measurements? Surely you should know. Or stretched the line upon it. On what were its bases sunk, or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. He's basically saying to Job, hey, I made this. I know how it works. And that is just the truth of who God is. He knows what's best. God knows what he's doing. We do not know what we're doing. I think that's a testament, again, to every single person. You think you know what you're doing? Wait 6 months. You're wrong. So David asks God to be taught in his ways. In verse 10, verse 10 in Psalm 25, let me flip back over to it, which is part of what Miss Jan read, said, all the paths of the Lord are steadfast love and faithfulness. And David is asking to be instructed in those paths. Teach me, Lord, how to do this. Now, it's again important to note that he's older in his life. He's prayed this prayer before. Do you think he's received instruction from the Lord on the paths of the Lord? Yeah, he has. He's continually asking for it because, again, as we said, this growing never stops. It doesn't stop. You're always growing. You're always learning. So he has a proper understanding of who God is. God has all knowledge, has all understanding, but he also provides salvation. That's verse 5. Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. In Joel chapter 2, verse 32, this one's not on the slides, I know for sure. Says, it shall come to pass that everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. God is the provider, the bringer, the facilitator of salvation. You cannot save yourself. We broke the covenant with God. We broke relationship with God, and now he provides a way to come back. Now we have the benefit of looking back, and we know the Messiah has come. We know that he has saved us from sin and death. His name is Jesus. He was alive about 2,000 years ago. He came and he lived a life we couldn't live, and he died a death we couldn't die, and he raised on the third day. And because of him, we have life. But David knows that God is the provider of salvation. He doesn't know how that's going to play all out in the future, but he calls upon the Lord for salvation because the Lord is the only one who provides it, the only one who can provide it. David has a proper understanding of who he is. He also has a proper understanding of who God is. Point 1 in our sermon today, again, I think that's one of the hardest things for us to understand, who we are, how we relate to God, what we need. I think that this point is actually pretty well understood, who God is in our culture. People just don't like it. I think we have a pretty proper understanding that God has ways he designed the world to work. But people don't want to live that way. God has ways he designed the world to work. God has plans that he put in place that were brought to fruition through Jesus. But we don't want to admit that we might be wrong. We don't want to admit that we might not know what we're doing. We don't want to admit that, hey, maybe the path that I chose for life isn't going to bring me joy and fulfillment, but it's really cool because culture says that I'm doing the things that are right. Culture says, I'm making all the money, I'm getting all the attention, I have all the community that I think that I need, but it's not through the person of Jesus Christ. It's not in something that is going to surpass this world, that is eternal. It is in material things that will pass away. So yeah, at this point, we're going to move past this to point 3 here in a second, but I think we know who God is. I think we have an understanding of that. It's just uncomfortable. That's all. So point number 3, David's heart and the heart of the Father are aligned. Now, when Saul was king over the people, he made some mistakes, which again, we all do. But he directly disobeyed God, and Samuel came in and said, hey, you didn't do what you were told. So now God is seeking a man after his own heart. So maybe you have seen, if you've been or heard, if you've been around church for a while, that David was a man after God's own heart. That's where that comes from. Pardon me. That's where that comes from. Samuel says, God's seeking a man after his own heart, and David is the one that is found at the end of that, right? But I think that the encapsulation of what that looks like is actually found in verse 22 at the very end of this, is that the heart of David and the heart of God are aligned. Redeem Israel, O God, out of all his troubles. David cares about not only himself, but the people of God, and he wants to see them saved and brought to redemption. That is the heart of someone who is aligned with the heart of the Father. Now, David is a shadow of Jesus, right? He shows us some of even the characteristics of Jesus in his life, but he's a shadow because he is a sinful man. He doesn't do things perfectly. He actually does a lot of things wrong. But his heart of redeeming the people of God is in line with the heart of God. God desires that all come to a saving knowledge of him. I think that verse 22 is actually the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, and the Great Commission, all kind of packed into, 7 words, 8 words? In 1 Corinthians 5, it says that God made him who knew no sin to be sin so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. God has made a way for his people to be saved, to be redeemed, to be eternally in communion with him, and that is through the person of Jesus Christ. Again, we have the benefit. We can look back. We know that this has happened, and now it is our goal and it is our job, Matthew 28, to make disciples of all nations, to baptize in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, to observe all that Jesus has commanded, and to understand and know that Jesus is always with us. This is the gospel and the Great Commission, all wrapped into one. We should, as a people of God, we just finished a whole series of what is the church. We should, as a people of God, have a desire that all people are people of God. So all people are saved. That all people are brought into, adopted into the family. That salvation is made known to everyone who we come in contact with. That should be part of our desire. That should be part of our heart. We should be aligned with the heart of the Father and David's heart in that. Tell him I said, hey. So as we wrap here, I just want to one more time make sure that we understand. We were separated from God. We were separated from God by our own sin, by our own iniquity, and he made a way back to him through the person of Jesus. There was a wall in between us, this wall of sin, and with my kids, I call it the Michael Jackson wall. It's too high to get over, too low to get under. You're stuck in the middle, all right? You can't get through this wall, but God made a way through the person of Jesus. He came and he lived a life we couldn't live. He died a death we couldn't die, and he raised on the third day. And if you call upon him for salvation, he is faithful and just, and he will save you. David knows who he is. David knows who God is. And because of that, his heart is aligned with the Father. Now, I have read all of these things out of order. And I know, again, I'm sorry if I frustrated somebody. We didn't go verse by verse. But that is because I would actually like to close and end by reading the entire psalm. After I am done reading, or while I'm reading, Julie, if you want to come back up here. And then Julie's going to sing a song when I'm done reading. And that me reading this is my prayer. I actually am going to make this a prayer of my life going forward. It has been impactful for me just in the season of life that I'm currently in, reading through this and studying through it. But I am going to read that as a prayer over us. And then Julie is going to sing, and that time is for you as a reflection. If you want to sing, you can sing. If you want to pray, you can pray. If you need to make amends, you can make amends. We don't always do that during reflection time, but you can. So I'm going to read the psalm, and it won't be on the screen. I'm just going to read it over us. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. O my God, in you I trust. Let me not be put to shame. Let not my enemies exalt over me. Indeed, none who wait for you shall be put to shame. They shall be ashamed who are wantonly treacherous. Make me to know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me. For you are the God of my salvation. For you I will wait all the day long. Remember your mercy, O Lord, and your steadfast love, for they have been from old. Remember not the sins of my youth or my transgressions. According to your steadfast love, remember me for the sake of your goodness, O Lord. Good and upright is the Lord. Therefore he instructs sinners in the way. He leads the humble in what is right and teaches the humble his way. All the paths of the Lord are steadfast love and faithfulness for those who keep his covenant and his testimonies. For your name's sake, O Lord, pardon my guilt, for it is great. Who is the man who fears the Lord? He will instruct in the way that he should choose. His soul shall abide in well-being, and his offspring shall inherit the land. The friendship of the Lord is for those who fear him, and he makes known to them his covenant. My eyes are ever toward the Lord, for he will pluck my feet out of the net. Turn to me and be gracious to me, for I am lonely and afflicted. The troubles of my heart are enlarged. Bring me out of my distresses. Consider my affliction and my trouble, and forgive my sins. Consider how many are my foes, and with what violent hatred they hate me. O guard my soul and deliver me. Let me not be put to shame, for I take refuge in you. May integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait for you. Redeem Israel, O God, out of all his troubles.